Chapter 1. The Drowned Town. The town of Black Hollow had once been full of life, a thriving lakeside community where the laughter of children echoed through the cobblestone streets. But now, it lay beneath the surface of the water, swallowed whole by an unnatural flood. The lake had no name on modern maps, just a blank blue void where Black Hollow had once stood. Ethan Fisher had heard the stories all his life, the whispers of drowned souls, the phantom bells tolling from beneath the waves, the midnight screams that rose from the lake when the moon was full. But standing here, at the crumbling edge of the forgotten town, he felt something deeper. Something watching. The water was still, too still, as if the lake itself were holding its breath. No wind disturbed the surface, no ripples broke the glassy calm. Yet Ethan could feel the movement below, the pull of something ancient lurking in the depths. Then, a ripple, faint but deliberate, expanding outward from the center of the lake, and beneath the water, just beyond the reach of the setting sun, something shifted. A shape, human but wrong, moving just beneath the surface. The first scream came a moment later, rising from the deep. Chapter 2. The Ripples in the Dark. Ethan stood frozen at the water's edge, his heart pounding as the eerie scream echoed over the lake. The ripple he had seen was not natural. It had started from nothing, growing outward as if something unseen had stirred beneath the surface. The water should have stilled by now, but it didn't. Instead, more ripples formed, silent, methodical, stretching across the lake's surface in unnatural patterns. They moved in different directions, overlapping yet never fading, as if something below was breathing, shifting in the deep. Ethan took a step back. The air around him had changed, thicker, heavier. The scent of damp earth and decay rising from the shoreline. The trees that framed the lake, once gently swaying, had gone still. Even the insects had stopped chirping. Something was wrong. Then, the second scream came, louder, closer. Ethan's body tensed as the ripple closest to him split apart, as though something was pushing up from beneath. A dark shape twisted just below the surface, just out of sight. The water convulsed, sending a sickening wave of murky black liquid sloshing onto the shore. He stumbled back, his breath catching. The temperature around him plummeted, ice forming along the water's edge despite the warm summer air. His reflection in the water shuddered, distorting, twisting, until it was no longer his own. The lake was trying to show him something. The ripples formed symbols now, patterns that pulsed, moving like a heartbeat. Shapes took form in the water, glimpses of structures beneath the surface, tilted rooftops, the spire of a church steeple, the warped remains of Black Hollow's drowned streets. The town still existed, buried in the lake's abyss. And then, the ripples stopped. The water, though still black, was eerily calm. For a moment, Ethan dared to hope the nightmare had passed. Then, a hand burst through the water, its fingers impossibly long, reaching toward him. But it wasn't alone. A second hand followed. And then a face, pale, bloated, its eyes open and staring, locked onto Ethan with an expression of silent, agonized pleading. The water did not simply ripple anymore. It screamed. Chapter 3. The Murmuring Depths. Ethan's feet skidded on the damp earth as he scrambled away from the reaching hand. His mind screamed for him to run, to flee from the nightmare clawing its way out of the lake, but something held him. An invisible pull, like the whisper of a voice just beyond his comprehension. The water trembled. Something was speaking. Not aloud, but beneath the surface, inside the dark depths where the drowned town lay hidden. The ripples that had once seemed random now pulsed with intent, moving in slow, rhythmic waves. A message, a beckoning. Ethan's breath came in uneven bursts. His heartbeat pounded in his ears, yet underneath it, he could hear the faintest sound. Murmuring. At first it was indecipherable, a soft, distant hum like voices carried on the wind. But as the seconds stretched, the sound grew clearer, the whispers threading through the air like a haunting melody. "Help us." Ethan's stomach clenched. The words were warped, garbled, but unmistakable. He took another step back, his foot sinking slightly into the damp mud. The lake shuddered, as if reacting to his movement, as if pleading, "Help us." Then the waters swelled. Not a wave, not a splash, but a slow, deliberate rise, as though something enormous was ascending from below, pushing the surface upward. The murmuring grew louder, overlapping voices tangled together in a discordant symphony. The first figure began to emerge. A woman, or what remained of one, drifted upward. Her dress, faded and torn, swayed as if caught in an unseen current. Her hair floated around her like a dark halo. Her eyes were open, wide, unseeing, locked in a frozen expression of terror. Her mouth was slightly ajar, as though she had been screaming when she died. But she was not alone. More figures surfaced, their bloated faces rising to meet the open air, their twisted hands reaching toward Ethan as if desperate for salvation. Dozens, no, hundreds. The entire town, trapped beneath the lake, now returning. Ethan's mind reeled. He stumbled back, but the mud pulled at his feet. The air felt heavier, pressing down on his lungs, filling his ears with the deafening hum of voices rising from the water. Then he saw it. The church bell, still partially intact, hanging from the collapsed steeple beneath the water. A relic of the town that had drowned long ago. It swung once, though there was no wind, and a deep, hollow toll vibrated through the air. The figures twitched. Their heads snapped toward Ethan all at once. The whispers stopped. Then, the figures opened their mouths and screamed. Chapter 4. The Reflections That Lie. Ethan stumbled back from the shore, his chest heaving as the echoes of the drowned figure's screams still rang in his ears. The lake had gone still again, too still, but the presence of something watching had not disappeared. His heart pounded, his breath came in short, ragged bursts, and then a flicker of movement, not in the water this time, but in his reflection. He caught it in the corner of his eye, a ripple, not in the lake, but in his own mirrored image on the water's surface. His reflection lagged behind, slower than it should have been, its mouth still hanging open in horror while his own lips had already snapped shut. Ethan's stomach twisted. Slowly, he crouched down near the water's edge, staring into the shifting darkness below. His mirrored self blinked back, but it was wrong. The eyes, they weren't his. They were too dark, hollow, watching him. A slow chill spread up his spine as the reflection tilted its head. He had not moved. The whispering returned, low, distorted, as if the voices were rising from the depths of the drowned town itself. The ripples in his reflection spread outward, distorting his features, and for a moment he thought he saw other faces within the waves, mouths open in silent screams, shifting beneath the surface like ghosts trapped in a mirror. Then his reflection smiled, a cold, empty grin that did not belong to him. Ethan lurched backward, nearly losing his footing in the mud. His reflection did not mimic the movement. It remained staring up at him with that horrible, knowing grin, its lips stretching wider than humanly possible. Then it began to rise, not out of the water, but through the water, as though peeling itself away from the surface. The liquid rippled outward, and suddenly, the thing in the reflection was not a reflection anymore. It stood before him, the water still clinging to its form, an exact copy of him, yet eerily distorted. Its limbs twitched unnaturally, its skin dripped with the blackened water of the lake, its smile never fading. Ethan's breath hitched as the figure took a step forward, its feet never breaking the surface. The water bent beneath it, supporting it, holding it like a cradle. Then it spoke. You shouldn't have looked. The voice was his. But layered beneath it, like a chorus of echoes, were the voices of the others, the lost souls beneath the lake, the ones who had screamed and begged and disappeared into the depths. Ethan turned to run. The thing moved too, its head tilting in an unnatural, bird-like motion as it followed him. The trees blurred past as he sprinted toward the forest's edge, his breath coming in sharp gasps. The ground beneath him felt wrong, like he was still running on water, like he had never escaped the reflection at all. Then the whispering turned to laughter, mocking. Familiar? Ethan skidded to a stop, his pulse hammering. He turned, breath catching in his throat. The reflection was still there, standing just behind him, though there was no water. It stood in the clearing, watching, waiting, and then it took another step forward. The ground rippled beneath its feet, and Ethan knew with a horrible certainty he was still in the lake. Chapter 5: The Stranger Beneath the Water. Ethan stood frozen at the lake's edge, his breath shallow as the dark water lapped at the shore. The night had swallowed the last remnants of sunlight, leaving only the lake's unnatural stillness to reflect the moon's pale glow. He should have turned away, left the cursed place behind, but something held him there. Something beneath the water. A shadow moved below the surface, shifting, stretching, growing clearer. Ethan's pulse quickened. At first it was just an outline, a silhouette too large to be human, yet disturbingly familiar. The ripples curled outward, revealing more. A figure. No, not just a figure. A man, but not a living one. Ethan's stomach twisted as the shape became clearer, rising slowly as if the water itself were giving birth to it. A head, slick with lake water, broke the surface. Hollow, unseeing eyes stared straight ahead. The stranger's skin was pale, bloated, his hair floating around his face like strands of rotting seaweed. His lips were parted slightly, as if whispering words that never reached the air. The lake gave a slow, unnatural inhale. Ethan felt it, the pressure shifting, as if the water itself was breathing. Then the stranger moved. Not like a person wading through water. No ripples formed as he drifted forward, his feet never breaking the surface, as though he were suspended in the lake's grasp. He raised a hand, fingers twitching, reaching toward Ethan. Ethan's legs locked in place. He wanted to run, but his body refused to obey. Then the stranger spoke. The words did not come from his lips, yet they echoed all around Ethan, weaving into the whispering voices that had haunted the air since the first ripple in the water. "You came back." Ethan's throat clenched. "No." The stranger's mouth twisted into something almost like a smile, cold, knowing, impossibly wide. The moment stretched too long, reality bending, the darkness of the lake expanding outward, swallowing the trees, the sky, even the air. Then the stranger took another step forward, his fingers nearly touching Ethan's chest, and the world plunged into blackness. Chapter 6. The Sunken Church Bell. Ethan stood at the edge of the lake, staring at the blackened waters that had swallowed the old town whole. The night was eerily silent, the air thick with an unnatural stillness that pressed against his chest. Somewhere beneath the surface, hidden within the ruins of Black Hollow, lay the sunken church. The final remnant of a town that had once thrived. Then, without warning, the water shuddered. A sound deep and resonant echoed from below, a bell tolling beneath the lake. The sound sent chills racing down Ethan's spine. It wasn't possible. The church had been submerged for decades, its bell tower long collapsed under the pressure of the water, and yet the noise rang out again, a deep, mournful chime that vibrated through the air, reaching into his bones. The lake rippled outward from a single point, spreading in slow, deliberate waves. A heavy mist curled from the water's surface, creeping along the shore like grasping fingers. Ethan took a step back, his instincts screaming at him to run. Then he saw it. Just beneath the surface, illuminated by the ghostly light of the moon, a structure emerged. The jagged remains of the church steeple. It shouldn't have been visible. The lake was deep, far too deep. And yet there it stood, shifting slightly in the currents, as if something was pulling it upward. The bell tolled again. This time the sound carried something with it, a voice, distant and broken, whispering through the wind. Ethan. His breath caught in his throat. He took another step back, but the muddy shore sucked at his boots, holding him in place. The water churned violently, and then a hand burst from the depths, grasping the air as if reaching for salvation. Ethan stumbled back, his pulse hammering. More hands followed, pale and bloated, breaking through the surface, stretching toward the sky. The whispering voices grew into a chorus of desperate pleas, rising and falling with the bells tolling. Then the steeple began to rise. The lake was giving up its dead, and Ethan knew, with a horrifying certainty, the town wasn't done with him yet. Chapter 7. The Lake That Breathes. Ethan's breath came in ragged gasps as he watched the lake shift before him. It was no longer just water. It was alive. The surface, once still and silent, now undulated in slow, rhythmic pulses, rising and falling, as if inhaling. The water itself seemed to expand, stretching outward, then contracting, pulling inward, like the lungs of a slumbering beast. Each movement sent ripples across the surface, spreading outward in unnatural waves, distorting the moon's reflection into grotesque shapes. The sound of breathing filled the air, not from Ethan, not from the trees that stood like silent sentinels along the shore, but from the lake itself. A deep, hollow exhalation, followed by another inhale. The water thickened, darkened, its depth stretching beyond reason, as if the lake had no bottom at all, only an endless, pulsing void. Then something shifted beneath the surface. A shape, massive and slow, slithered through the depths. Ethan's pulse hammered as he saw the vague outline, shifting like a shadow cast against the lake bed. He tried to convince himself it was a trick of the water, an illusion created by the moonlight, but the longer he watched, the more certain he became. Something was moving beneath him. The next breath the lake took was louder, a deep, guttural sound, almost like a groan. The surface swelled, rising unnaturally high before falling back down. Ethan stumbled backward as a spray of water crashed onto the shore, soaking his boots. A whisper curled around him, carried by the lake's breath. Leap. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't a warning. It was a plea. Ethan turned, ready to obey, but the ground beneath him trembled. The lake inhaled again, longer, deeper, and for a brief, horrifying moment, he felt himself being pulled forward, as if the very air had turned to liquid, drawing him toward the hungry depths. His legs locked in place, his body leaning toward the water without his control. Then the exhale came, and something else surfaced. Chapter 8, The Fisherman's Last Catch. The lake had never been kind to those who trespassed its waters after dark. Ethan had heard the stories, tales of boats found drifting without their owners, of fish caught with human bones tangled in their nets. But none haunted the town as much as the legend of Isaac Hollis, the fisherman who never returned. Isaac had been an old man, weathered by years at sea, stubborn as the tide. He had refused to heed the warnings, casting his lines well past dusk. He would sit alone in his boat, his lantern swaying in the blackness, his hook sinking deep where no light could reach, until one night, when his boat came back, without him. Ethan stood at the same dock where Isaac had launched his final trip. The wooden planks creaked beneath his weight, warped and damp from years of neglect. The air was thick with the scent of rotting wood and lake water. The boat, his boat, was still there, tied loosely to the post, rocking ever so slightly despite the windless night. Something about it felt wrong. The lake was silent now, no fish splashed, no insects hummed, just the faint sound of water lapping against the hull. Ethan swallowed hard, stepping toward the boat. A thick layer of moss and grime coated the seats, but the lantern still hung from its rusted hook, unlit, swaying as if moved by some unseen hand. Then, a plop in the water? Ethan froze, his gaze snapping to the lake's surface. Rings of ripples expanded outward, disturbed by something unseen beneath. His pulse quickened. he wasn't alone. A low, hollow sound echoed from the water, a wet, dragging noise, like something being pulled across the lake bed. The ripples grew larger, moving toward him. Ethan stepped back, but his foot hit something solid. The boat, and inside it something shifted. Slowly, his gaze lowered. Beneath the layers of grime and rotting wood, a handprint had formed on the seat. Wet, fresh, as if someone had just climbed in. Chapter 9. The Voices in the Fog. The fog rolled in thick and heavy, swallowing the lake's edge in a smothering blanket of gray. Ethan's breath came in uneven gasps as he stumbled forward, his boots sinking into the damp earth. The shoreline had disappeared behind the veil of mist, leaving him trapped in a world of nothingness. Then the whispers began. At first they were faint, like the wind rustling through unseen branches. But the longer he stood still, the clearer they became. Voices, many voices, murmuring, overlapping, speaking in hushed, frantic tones just beyond the fog's reach. Turn back. The words slithered through the air, carried by something unseen. Ethan's pulse hammered as he turned, trying to find the source, but the fog was impenetrable. Shapes moved within it, figures shifting just at the edge of his vision. A soft, desperate sob echoed through the mist. Then another, and then a scream. Not a scream of terror, but of rage. Ethan staggered backward as the voices rose into a chaotic chorus. Pleas, cries, warnings. The fog thickened, pressing against him like a living thing. He felt something brush against his arm, cold fingers grasping. The voices surrounded him now, whispering in unison. You shouldn't be here. The fog shifted, and from within its depths, something stepped forward. A shape, barely distinguishable, formed in the mist. A figure draped in shadows, its features blurred yet unmistakably watching him. Ethan tried to move, but his body refused to obey. The air turned frigid, heavy with something unseen pressing against his skin. The whispers became clearer now, unraveling into fragmented sentences. He's here, he's here. The figure in the fog took another step forward. And another. Ethan's breath hitched as the silhouette began to take shape. Familiar yet wrong. Its limbs were too long, its posture too rigid, as if mimicking human movement but failing to understand it. The fog curled around it like a cloak, concealing everything but its eyes. Ethan recognized those eyes because they were his. A sharp, guttural whisper broke through the noise, more forceful than the rest. Leave now before it's too late. But it was already too late. Chapter 10. The Sinking Cabin. Ethan's footsteps slowed as he emerged from the dense thicket, his breath coming in sharp gasps. Before him, half submerged in the lake, sat an old, rotting cabin. Its skeletal frame jutted out of the water like the remains of a forgotten shipwreck. The wooden beams groaned under the weight of time, leaning precariously as if caught in an eternal struggle between land and water. The stories had spoken of it, a place where those who had disappeared from Black Hollow were last seen, a cabin that, according to legend, did not always stay in the same place. And now it had returned. The water lapped at its sunken foundation, each ripple carrying whispers that seemed to beckon him forward. Ethan hesitated. The air here was different. Thicker, heavier, as though the lake itself was holding its breath. The scent of damp wood and decay clung to his senses. A sudden splash echoed through the silence. Ethan's head snapped toward the sound, his pulse hammering. Something moved beneath the surface. He couldn't see what, but the ripples racing outward from the cabin's edge told him he wasn't alone. Then the door creaked open, on its own. Ethan's breath hitched. Inside the cabin was impossibly dark. The wooden floor, though half submerged, appeared strangely intact. The shadows seemed to shift, almost watching him. A voice, barely more than a whisper, curled through the stagnant air. "Come inside." Ethan's body tensed. He had not imagined that. The water around the cabin began to rise. Slowly at first, then faster, swallowing the steps leading to the door. The lake was pulling it down, dragging the structure deeper into the abyss. If he entered now, would he ever come back? Another sound, a wet, dragging noise, came from inside. And then something stepped forward. A shape emerged, half hidden in the shadows. At first, Ethan thought it was just the play of darkness and water, but then it moved again, its outline shifting like liquid. It was tall, impossibly thin, its limbs elongated and boneless, swaying with an unnatural rhythm. Its face remained unseen, veiled in the cabin's oppressive blackness. The whisper came again, this time more insistent. "You know this place." Ethan's breath stilled. A sensation rippled through him, something akin to memory but distant, like recalling a dream long forgotten. The cabin wasn't just an eerie relic of the past. It was familiar. He took an involuntary step forward. The floor beneath him trembled, vibrating as the cabin continued to sink. The water reached the doorway now, licking the edges of the entrance, as though urging him inside. The figure took another step forward. A single claw-like hand reached out from the darkness, dripping with water that didn't ripple as it fell. Ethan finally found his voice. "Who are you?" The thing in the doorway tilted its head, and then, in his own voice, it answered. Chapter 11. The Bones Under the Dock. Ethan stood at the edge of the dock, the wooden planks creaking beneath his weight. The lake stretched before him, silent and vast, its surface black and unyielding. The stories about this place had always unnerved him, the whispered rumors of the dock being more than just a landing for boats. It was said to be a graveyard, a place where the lake refused to let go of its dead. A chill ran through him as he peered over the edge, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness below. The water barely rippled, but something stirred beneath the surface, something that had been waiting. The lake had secrets, and tonight it was ready to reveal them. Ethan crouched down, gripping the dock's splintered edge. He wasn't sure why he had come here, only that the pull had been undeniable, as though the lake itself had called him. He reached into the water with the flashlight, illuminating the depths beneath the dock. And then he saw them. Bones. Tangled in the weeds, half buried in the mud, skeletal remains, reaching upward as if clawing for escape. Some were broken, others disturbingly intact, their hollow sockets staring into nothingness. Ethan's breath hitched, his pulse thundered in his ears. This wasn't just one body, there were many. The stories had been true. Then the bones moved. At first, it was subtle, a shift barely perceptible. But then, the mud began to bubble, and the skeletal hands twitched, grasping at the water, pulling themselves free. A deep, guttural moan echoed from beneath the dock. Ethan scrambled backward, but the dock beneath him shuddered. The wood groaned, as if something massive was shifting below, something rising. The water darkened, thickened, as figures began to emerge. Skeletal arms tangled in weeds gripped the dock's beams, pulling themselves up. Hollow sockets stared through dripping skulls, their jaws twitching as if trying to speak. One of the figures turned toward Ethan, its movements unnatural, jerky, as though it were being controlled by invisible strings. Then, a voice, a whisper carried by the cold night air. "Join us." The lake beneath the dock exploded with movement. Dozens of hands burst from the water, clawing at the wood, at Ethan. The dock groaned, sagging under the weight of the dead, the planks snapping as the lake tried to drag him down. Ethan fought against the pull, kicking, pushing, scrambling to his feet, but the fingers, wet, skeletal fingers, dug into his legs, his arms, holding him in place. The whispering grew louder. The dock collapsed beneath him, and as he plunged into the freezing water, the last thing he saw was a skull, grinning, inches from his face. Chapter 12. The Thing That Floats at Night. Ethan gasped for air as he surfaced, the freezing water clawing at his skin like grasping hands. The lake had swallowed him whole, and for a moment he had been surrounded by nothing but darkness, silence, and the cold grip of the dead. But now he had risen back to the surface. The dock was gone. The bones, the skeletal hands, everything had vanished beneath the water. But something else was here. Something was floating nearby. A dark shape bobbed on the water's surface, barely visible against the endless black. It wasn't a piece of the dock, nor was it an abandoned boat. It was something else. Ethan's body refused to move, his instincts screaming at him to stay still, not to draw attention. But his breathing, his ragged, desperate gasps echoed in the silence. And the thing in the water shifted. A slow ripple spread outward as it began to drift toward him. Ethan blinked, the moonlight barely illuminating the shape. His mind scrambled to make sense of it. A log? A bundle of fabric? And then it rolled over. A face, bloated, lifeless, grinning. The lips curled unnaturally, revealing darkened, rotting gums. Its eyes, open, locked onto him. The skin was waterlogged, the features swollen beyond recognition, yet Ethan could feel its intent. It wasn't just a body, it was watching. The thing lurched forward. The water shuddered. Ethan barely had time to react before it was upon him. Cold, clammy fingers clamped around his wrist. A surge of unnatural strength yanked him downward. Water flooded his ears as he plunged back beneath the surface, his scream lost in the depths. The pressure crushed his chest, the icy grip dragging him further and further into the abyss. Shapes moved in the darkness below. More bodies, More faces, all grinning, all staring with hollow, unblinking eyes. Their bloated hands reached for him, their mouths moving, whispering words he couldn't hear, yet he somehow understood. "Stay with us." Ethan thrashed, his lungs burning, but the hands held firm. The floating corpse that had grabbed him loomed closer, its face inches from his own. Its grin widened. Too wide, too human, yet inhuman all the same. And then it spoke. "You belong here." Ethan's vision blurred. The lake was swallowing him whole again. Then light. A distant glow broke through the blackness above. His fingers clawed for it, desperate, lungs screaming for air. The hands that held him began to weaken, their grip loosening. He kicked, thrashed, reached. And then, with one final desperate lunge, he broke the surface. Chapter 13. The Black Water's Curse. Ethan barely had time to gasp before something wrapped around his ankle, a cold, pulsing tendril. Not a hand, not a rope, but something alive, tightened and pulled. The surface of the lake rushed away from him, swallowed in a blink as he was dragged back into the abyss. Water rushed into his ears, muffling his scream. His lungs burned as he twisted and kicked, trying to free himself, but the thing below, the lake itself, refused to let him go. Shapes moved in the water, not just bodies, faces, hollow-eyed, grinning, distorted by the rippling blackness. Some of them reached for him, their hands mere shadows in the murky dark. And then a voice, "You are ours now." Ethan thrashed harder, his chest tightening. The tendril around his ankle pulled again, yanking him deeper. The water grew heavier, denser, as though it wasn't just water anymore, but something thicker, something ancient, something that had been waiting. Through the dim glow filtering from above, he saw the lake floor below him, or what should have been the floor. It wasn't sand, it wasn't rocks. It was shifting, breathing, moving. The water trembled as the surface of the lake bed cracked open. A black gaping maw unfurled, wide as a cavern, pulsing like the throat of some sleeping beast. Ethan couldn't tell where the lake ended and this thing began. Was the lake itself alive? The whispering returned, but now it came from the darkness below. "You belong here." Ethan's lungs screamed, his vision blurred, the world tilted. And then the lake swallowed him whole. Chapter 14. The Tide That Never Rises. Ethan crawled onto the shore, his body trembling, his lungs heaving for air. The lake, now eerily still behind him, had spit him out as though it had lost interest. The cold clung to his skin, sinking into his bones, but he didn't care. He was alive. Or was he? The world around him felt off. The trees stood motionless, their branches too still, as if frozen in time. The sky above was wrong, a deep, oppressive shade of gray, with no sun, no stars, no moon. Just emptiness. He turned back toward the water. The surface was unnaturally smooth, not a single ripple disturbing its perfect glass-like sheen. The tide, which should have been moving, should have been responding to the pull of the wind or the moon, remained frozen in place. It did not rise, it did not fall. It was waiting. Ethan staggered to his feet, his head pounding. The whispers had faded, replaced by a silence that felt heavier than any sound. He took a cautious step back from the water's edge. And then, a figure stood at the shoreline. Ethan's breath caught. It was familiar, too familiar. The same stance, the same soaked clothes, the same haunted, exhausted look. It was him, the reflection of himself, not in the water, but standing there on the shore, watching, waiting, and then it spoke in his own voice. "You never left." Ethan's stomach twisted into knots. He took a step back, but so did the other Ethan. Their movements mirrored each other, too perfectly. Every small shift, every twitch of his fingers, every unsteady breath echoed by the doppelganger before him. But then, the other Ethan smiled. Not a natural expression, not a reflection of his own. The grin stretched too wide, revealing teeth that were not his. Jagged, impossibly sharp, blackened at the edges like something rotten beneath the flesh. The thing wearing his face stepped forward. The ground beneath Ethan's feet rippled like water. His boots sank slightly, as if the solid earth was turning to liquid beneath him. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "This isn't real." The other Ethan's grin widened further, its lips splitting open, stretching beyond the limits of human flesh. Its head tilted at an unnatural angle, eyes darkening into empty voids. And then it lunged. Ethan stumbled back, but his feet wouldn't move fast enough. The air around him thickened, pressing against his skin like unseen hands pushing him toward the water's edge. The doppelganger's fingers elongated, stretching into tendrils that lashed toward him. He screamed, and behind him, the tide finally began to rise. Chapter 15. The Final Scream from Below. Ethan's scream was swallowed by the rising tide as the ground beneath him dissolved. The solid earth turned to water, thick and heavy like oil, dragging him down. His arms flailed, but there was nothing to grasp, only the cold embrace of the lake reclaiming him. The doppelganger loomed above, watching with hollow, blackened eyes. Its mouth, still stretched into that grotesque grin, twisted further as it spoke. "You were always meant to stay." The tendrils lashed forward, wrapping around his arms, his legs, his throat. They pulled him down, deeper and deeper, until the surface was nothing but a distorted shimmer above. The water pressed in from all sides, squeezing the breath from his lungs, muting his final cries. Shapes drifted in the darkness below, familiar yet grotesquely altered. The drowned, the lost, the ones who had come before. Their faces twisted with unspoken agony, their mouths moving in silent wails. Ethan's body convulsed as cold fingers grasped at his limbs, pulling him into the abyss. And then he saw it, the true form of the lake. Not just water, but a gaping void, stretching endlessly below. A bottomless maw that had fed for centuries, swallowing souls and keeping them trapped in its depths. A final breath left Ethan's lips, bubbles rising to the unreachable surface. The whispers in the water crescendoed, not in warning, but in welcome. Then, from deep within the abyss, something shifted. A new presence stirred, something far older, far worse than the drowned souls surrounding him. The void was not just swallowing. It was awakening. Ethan's fading consciousness clung to one last shred of awareness as a monstrous silhouette unfurled below him, its many eyes blinking open in the crushing blackness. The drowned souls recoiled, their wails merging into a singular, mind-shattering sound: terror. Ethan's body twisted as a vast, unseen force pulled him downward faster. The tendrils around his limbs tightened, not just dragging him into the void, but offering him as an offering. The thing below opened its maw. Ethan's final scream never made it past his lips before the darkness claimed him. Above, the tide fell silent once more, and beneath the lake, something began to rise.